Okay, hi, today we're going to do more quadratic formula. This is day 2 of the quadratic formula. I'm going to jump right in. The first problem is find the zeros. So, same directions, remember find the zeros is the same as finding the x-intercepts, which is the same as solve it. In other words, you're using the quadratic formula to solve it. Alright, so first thing we do is find a, b, and c. A is what's in front of the x squared, which is the 3. B is what's in front of the x, which is 2, and C is the regular number, which in this case is negative 4. Okay, next I'm going to plug those numbers into the quadratic formula, which is this, negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2 times a. Alright, so when I plug those values in, I get this. I got, let's see, b is negative 2. It becomes negative when I plug it into the formula, rather. This number here squared, which is 2 minus 4 times a is 3. C is negative 4 all over 2 times a is 3. Okay, so that's what I get when I plug the values in there. And the next thing I'm going to do is start simplifying what's under the radical. Okay, 2 squared is 4. Once again, I always take an extra moment, check out how many minus signs I got, or negatives. In this case, I got 2, so that's going to be a plus. And 4 times 4 times 3 is 16 times 3 is 48. Over 2 times 3 is 6. All right, so I'm going to simplify this a little more. 4 plus 48 is 52 all over 6. Okay, now this one's a little different than the ones I tackled in the last video because that's not a perfect square. In fact, that's what we call an irrational number. 50 square root of 52. There's nothing that times itself is 52. Therefore, that ends up being what we call an irrational number because it's a decimal that goes on forever and ever with no pattern. So, you know, what I'm going to do is I'm going to break it up into decimals, okay? I'm going to take the negative 2, I'm going to go plus. So over on the side here, I've taken my calculator and I've gone square root of 52, I'm just going to write it over here, is 7.21. I'm rounding off a little bit there. I'm going to change that equal sign to an approximate sign, a wavy equal sign, which means it's approximately 7.21 because, as I said, that's a rounded off number. Okay, so 7.21 divided by 6. Over here I've got negative 2 minus 7.21 divided by 6. Definitely need a calculator here. If I take 7.21 and I subtract or add negative 2 to it and then divide by 6, I get my first answer of 0.87 if I round off. Over here, if I take negative 2 minus 7.21 and divide by 6, I get negative 1.54. So those are my two answers. X equals 0.87 and x equals negative 1.54. And those are my two answers in this case. All right? And that's it for that problem. Number 2. X squared, oh yeah, I should write directions. Find the x-intercepts. X equals, nope, sorry, not x equals, x minus 4x equals negative 4. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is I need to bring everything to one side of the equal sign. So I'm going to add 4 to both sides. So I got equals 0 over there, okay? And on the left side I got, that should be x squared. X squared minus 4x plus 4. Okay, so there's my trinomial. Now I can find out what a, b, and c are. A is what's in front of the x squared. which is an implied 1. There's always an implied 1 there if there's nothing written. B is what's in front of the x, and c is the regular number. Next, I plug those numbers into my quadratic formula, which is negative b plus or minus the square b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. So negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4 times a times c all over 2 times a. All right, so that's what I get when I plug the numbers in. Now let me start simplifying this. So I got a double negative here, which makes that positive 4. Negative 4 squared in parentheses like that is positive 16. 4 times 1 times 4 is 16, so I got 16 minus 16. There's only one subtraction sign there, all over 2. All right, so this is kind of a cool one because I get the square root of 0. And the square root of 0 is 0, which means I've got 4 plus or minus 0 over 2. Now, if you add 0 or subtract 0, you end up with exactly the same thing. So you're actually only going to get one answer here. So x equals 2. And that's it. Both of them were 2, okay? Just a quick flashback here for a moment. Just a quick reminder that, you know, when you have quadratic formula, like I told you guys, you're finding where it crosses the x-axis. And there's 3 situations that happen. That can happen, I should say. Uh-oh. Okay, so there's 3 different scenarios that can happen. From a graphing point of view. You know, the first one and most common is that parabola comes down, hits that x-axis in 2 different spots. Remember, these are the 2 things you're finding when you do the quadratic formula. Occasionally also, sometimes that parabola might come down, or it could be going the other direction too, go up, and it only hits it in one particular spot. And this would have one solution. And that's the case we just hit, where, you know, x only equaled 2, okay? And the other case that can happen is, you know, that parabola goes up towards it or down towards that axis and never actually hits it, in which case you'd have, you know, no solution. And we'll show you about those eventually as well, okay? So those are the 3 kind of things that can happen. We just hit, for the first time, one solution. All right, this is going to be my third and final problem here. 3p squared plus 4p equals 10. All right, so the first thing I need to do, and the directions will say, find the zeros. Okay, so the first thing I need to do is I need to have equals 0 on one side of the equation. So I'm going to subtract that 10. It's easier to move one thing instead of the other 2. And I get 3p squared plus 4p minus 10 equals 0. And now I'm going to solve it. Quadratic formula, A, B, C. A is 3, B is 4, C is negative 10. Plug those into the quadratic formula, negative b plus or minus b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. And so negative b will be negative 4 plus or minus b squared minus 4 times a is 3, c is negative 10, all over 2a. All right, so all I did was plug in the numbers so far. I know I did it quickly, just in the interest of time. It is a video. If you need to slow it down and back up to make sure I did it right, please do. Next, I'm going to work on what's under that radical. Negative 4 plus or minus the square root of 4 squared is 16. Once again, I got minus here and a negative there, which means it's going to be a plus. There's 2 of them, so 2 negatives make a positive. 4 times 3 is 12. 12 times 10 . 12 times 10 is 1200. And this is all over 6. All right, so if I simplify that, 16 plus 1200 is 1216 all over 6. Now the square root of 1216, if I punch that into my calculator, is not a right even number. Once again, it's an irrational number. I'm going to use the decimal. I'm going to use it to the nearest hundredth. All right, 34.87. So I'm going to break this up into the plus and into the minus. So I got -4 plus 34.87 divided by 6. And over here I've got -4 minus 34.87 divided by 6. And when I punch that in my calculator, I get 5.15 over here if I round off. On the right side, I got -4 minus 34.87 divided by 6. Remember to hit equals after the subtraction. Equals -6.48. And those would be my two answers. X equals 5. Was it X or this one was P, I think, right? I mean, it doesn't matter. It's just a variable. But I'll try to be correct. P equals 5.15 and P equals -6.48. And those are my two answers. Okay? All right. So thanks for watching. Close out with a little more music.